Today is the fifth talk on the Satipatthana Sutta. This sutta is nearly as foundational to the Buddha's teachings as the Four Noble Truths, because it teaches the proper application of mindfulness as it relates to the Four Noble Truths. So the first week we talked about mindfulness as mindfulness relates to meditation, to be mindful of the breath in the body, to be mindful of feelings and thoughts arising. And then the second week we talked about the being mindful of the present quality of mind, and that's mostly in relation to meditation, but it's also off our cushion, to notice how that the action or reaction to feelings and thoughts affects the quality of our mind, or if we're not reactive, that our present quality of mind is peaceful. Then we talked about mindfulness of the five hindrances, being mindful of sensory desire, ill will, restlessness and anxiety, laziness or drowsiness, and doubt and uncertainty. And again, that the Buddha uses mindfulness to be dispassionate. In other words, if we find that that we're stuck in constant sensory need, to not judge ourselves harshly, just to be mindful of it so that we can let it go. And the reason why that's important, if we're judging ourselves harshly in any way, we're just forming stronger attachments to whatever that is. Be mindful that we're doing something that is, the best way to look at it, it's not skillful in relation to the Dhamma. Simply recognize it and let it go. Then we talked about, last week I guess it was, the five clinging aggregates: form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, and ongoing consciousness, and that consciousness rooted in ignorance. That's an important point to make, and I know I make it over and over again. The modern New Age, it's not really New Age, the modern New Age way of looking at consciousness is consciousness with a big C, that we're all part of one grand cosmic consciousness, moving along kind of the same path. There's a modern, somewhat modern word for that called panpsychism, which is this underlying theory in many religions and New Age thought. In New Age thought, I mean any kind of developing spiritual thought, that the mind is all part of one great mind. And you can call that God, you can call it whatever you want, and that it's usually presented this way, panpsychism, that mind is what's controlling us in some way and is guiding us towards a greater way of being. It's just more eye-making when you look at it that way. You could say that there's some relevance to that idea of panpsychism, or a grand cosmic consciousness, in recognizing your own contributions to that then. And that's just a practical way. The more we are aligned, or more well-developed we are with the Eightfold Path, the more we're contributing to the common good in that way. And so that's a practical way that we're contributing to the common good of the panpsychic mind too. So that relates to that last part of the five clinging aggregates. Again, form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, and consciousness. Just to be mindful of it, that this is the vehicle that we put together that results in having the ongoing experience of dukkha. And why is it important to be mindful of it? Because if we're mindful of the fact that we've clung these aggregates together to form a self, we can uncling it. We're in control of it, is really the point of that. We're in control of how we think. We're in control of our actions, as long as we develop concentration framed by the Eightfold Path. So that's where we are today. Again, everything the Buddha taught is taught in a practical way. Is it cool in here?
Uncomfortable. Yeah. Just the air going away on this.
Everybody's all right?
I can do it. Just switch off for a while. It's cold.
If anybody gets hot, just tell me. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it was crazy out there Thursday.
Oh my gosh.
So this section of the Satipatthana Sutta is mindfulness of the sixth sense base. The Buddha's words. Furthermore, one remains mindful of the quality of the mind in reference to the sixth sense base. Remain mindful of the I form and the clinging that arises from the I form. In other words, something catches our eye, we're interested in it, or we become enamored with it, we start clinging to it. We start creating an identity. As soon as I say, I like this, or I join with it because of its attractiveness to me, that's clinging to the I form. Be mindful of the arising of clinging to I form. So recognize the process. As it's occurring, you can, if you have a well-concentrated mind, you can observe yourself clinging to something that's caught your eye. Mindful that when clinging to the I form is completely abandoned, clinging to the I form will not arise in the future. That's such a powerful line when you look at it. When you completely let go of any clinging to what's arising, it will never arise again. Cessation of the path. We probably won't get to it today, but in the conclusion to this sutta, in fact, I'm sure we'll finish it next week, is how long it takes to develop the type of mindfulness that leads to an awakened mind. And the Buddha takes it from 7 years to 6 years to 5. Well, I'm giving that talk now, aren't I? Ultimately, it is when you develop mindfulness, it's totally framed by the Eightfold Path, awakening occurs. And there's really no time frame on it. And it begins in this very practical way, to recognize where we're clinging, where we're attaching ourselves, where we're joining. Jen asked such a good question last week, where we're joining to the outside world. When does it occur? It occurs all the time. But that joining to the outside world is affecting the inner world. A mind that should be always resting in equanimity is now disturbed by that attachment to the outside world. There's an act of, if you want to say disturbance is an act of mindlessness, this is what the Buddha is talking to, but it's really a form of negative mindfulness. Mindfulness is anything, holding in mind to recollect. So something catches my eye and I become obsessed with it. That's a form of mindfulness, but it's hurtful mindfulness. Remain mindful of the ear form and the clinging that arises from the ear form. Be mindful of the arising of clinging to the ear form. Be mindful that when clinging to the ear form is completely abandoned, clinging to the ear form will not arise in the future. Remain mindful of the nose form and the clinging that arises from the nose form. Be mindful of the arising of clinging to the nose form. Be mindful that when clinging to the nose form is completely abandoned, clinging to the nose form will not arise in the future. I got to teach my dog that. Remain mindful of the tongue form and the clinging that arises from the tongue form. Be mindful of the arising of clinging to the tongue form. Be mindful that when clinging to the tongue form is completely abandoned, clinging to the tongue form will not arise in the future. So those of you that have developed a good understanding of right speech, you'll understand this, how we get so enamored with what we're saying and how we're saying it, clinging to the tongue form, and how we start using our words to manipulate the world around us, and to ourselves. That's all part of clinging to the tongue form. And also, obviously, with using that as its primary ability for taste. Being mindful of the body form, or any touch sense, and the clinging that arises from the body form. Be mindful of the arising of clinging to the body form. Be mindful that when clinging to the body form is completely abandoned, the body form will not arise, or will not arise in the future. Also, reminding us and saying that, be mindful when these clinging to forms are completely abandoned, that they won't arise in the future, that it's possible to actually do this. Initially, it's almost impossible to think about not clinging to things that are attractive to us. And we're also, the other side of the coin is clinging to the things that are unattractive in the same way, rather than just experiencing what's occurring in our life. Because it's occurring, not because it's right or wrong, because we like it or don't like it, it's simply what's occurring. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I'm having a problem understanding how recognizing clinging to something and abandoning it will allow it to never arise again. Because I look at it more like we test the waters and then we realize we're in a little deep and we pull out. Like I could sit there and read 3 articles about Donald Trump, and then when I start the 4th one, I go, all right, now I'm getting a little obsessed, and I just stop it. But I need to feel like I've gotten a little obsessed before I can stop it. Like I don't think I don't want to speak for anyone, but I don't think I could ever abandon clinging. I just can recognize better when it's happening and pull away from it.
It's a great question. It's an important question. In the process of abandoning clinging, it is just that. It's a process. And it's, for most of us, it's a gradual process. So using your example, it might have been 6 months ago, you had to read 6 articles before you could let go of clinging. And then it was 5, then it was 3. Next week it might be 2, eventually it's 1. When you completely let go of the obsession to read Donald Trump articles, completely, there's not a fragment of the underlying obsession, then there's nothing to drive that anymore.
Yeah, I'm just caught up on the it never arising again part, because I think that's what makes us human.
For me, it's just a switch. Okay, so I'm not obsessed with this now, but now I'm on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, there's always when
like,
well, but the point is that it won't. Human. It simply means that you're no longer attached to the world in that way, and it certainly doesn't mean that you're detached. It simply means that you're not driven by any type of clinging obsession. So, and it doesn't mean you might not read 100 articles about Donald Trump one after the other. It simply means you won't be driven by obsession to do it. It's really a fundamental question, Anthony. It's very hard to imagine life without some underlying motivation there. But that underlying motivation, if you really look at your question, it's, where am I in this then? What happens? Because we feel like we need to have this ego self driving us. And an awakened mind understand that you don't need that at all, because the ego mind is attached in a very minor way to ignorance. It arises out of that initial ignorance. You could also say that the ego arises from that second factor of dependent origination, from forming assumptions about the world. And that's one assumption to drive me, to continue me. And of course, the example of the Buddha and other awakened human beings is just the opposite. He lived the most meaningful life without any self-referential view driving that.
Yeah. It's just hard for me to believe that I can live my life without some element of clinging creeping in every now and then.
Yeah, it is. It's nearly impossible to understand it. But if you think about any element of clinging is also an element of distraction and disturbance. Can you imagine a peaceful and calm mind that is always that way, a mind of equanimity? Mind requires
to get things done.
I would bet that you are most productive when your mind is most at peace.
Yeah, that's true. I have very productive thoughts sometimes.
Yeah.
Meditating.
Again, that's that part of the ego self that creates distraction by these ideas, because it really is just an idea that I need an ego. It's a view rooted in ignorance. And it uses those continued ideas as continued distraction. Distraction is necessary. Distraction is another word for ignoring something. Continued ignorance is required to continue to be ignorant in some ways. Another word for ignorance is simply not knowing something.
But isn't it nice sometimes to invite a little bit of clinging and craving in our life? No, I mean, like if I'm watching a Mets game, I'm clinging and craving through the whole game, and I enjoy that, and I can put it away when it's done. But I mean, isn't it nice sometimes to have a little bit of that?
Yeah.
Honestly, if I have to answer no, it's not. Because for fully developing the Eightfold Path, even that is a disturbance, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't enjoy our lives, but it does mean we shouldn't have to put conditions on your life. So again, in a very subtle, you're getting to some very subtle. You are saying that you in order for for your life to have the meaning that you want it to have, you need to have some type of obsession over the Mets.
You don't have to fully.
Rather,
Well, it's not an obsession. It's just for the game. I'm rooting for my team, and there's a lot of clinging and craving involved in that.
but again, that's the condition you're putting on your life. That's called conditioned
That's
thinking.
how you root, because you just go, oh, I hope whatever happens, happens.
Yes, but again, it's a good point. I don't know that Becky needs to have a Mets game in her life in order to have a fulfilled life. The condition
Not really. I don't need it, but from time to time I enjoy it.
But if he's watching the game with a bunch of his friends, then even if you're trying to be clinging to it, then the environment around you kind of, you can't isolate yourself from your friends.
But that's the environment that the Buddha uses to say there is dukkha in the world. It doesn't mean when you're watching a Mets game or listening to an opera or watching a sunset, you shouldn't be mindfully present and enjoying it. I mean, that's really the essence of being an awakened human being.
Are you saying that you shouldn't be hoping for your team to win?
Yeah, because that's clinging and craving, right? Because you're getting mad that somebody struck out or struck your guy out. You're wishing it would be different.
Well, we're getting a little bit beyond the middle way of being a human being, but do you want your own mind to be? This is an individual thing. This isn't something that the Buddha would teach. Would teach in a specific way. It's up to us to monitor the quality of our mind. And if I'm going crazy over every strikeout during a Mets game, it's not that it's wrong in relation to the Dhamma. It's wrong in relation to protecting the quality of my own mind. It's my choice to lose my mind over a strikeout or a bad pitch. Pardon me?
It does create stress.
Yes, and so it's up to us in that way. There's absolutely nothing in the Buddha's Dhamma that would say that it's wrong in a moral sense to obsess over a Mets game or a poor opera performance. In our minds, what's occurring? If it's a disturbance in our minds, it's up to us to recognize the hurtfulness of the clinging. So it's not right or wrong to enjoy a Mets game. What's occurring within the quality of your mind? Honestly, Anthony, I would say if you can't enjoy the Mets game unless the Mets win, there really is too much clinging there.
Yeah.
I once had a teacher years ago. He's still alive. He's gotten a little bit, like I say, he's still alive. He's a great man. His name was Arnold Patton. Years and years ago, quick story, and then hopefully I can get back to this. He was 50 years old, and he was just full of physical and emotional pain. He was a very well-respected real estate attorney up in Westchester, kind of made tons of money. And he was just disgusted with everything. And he left the life, and he started meditating and doing some other things. And he came to some realizations that most of them are very close to what the Buddha would have taught. And he said the Buddha wouldn't have taught. But one of his things was he was so disgusted with the competitive nature of life. And he also loved tennis. And he came up with this idea of non-competitive tennis. Him and a couple of his friends would get together and they'd see how long they could keep the ball going over the net. They had a great time. They got great exercise and nobody got upset. That's kind of the point, that you can enjoy a baseball game without having the obsessive need that your team win at all costs. And just watch. I mean, I occasionally watch the Yankees, and honestly, I don't really care that much that they win anymore. I still like to watch the kind of the ballet of baseball. If you really, most people find baseball incredibly boring, and I can understand that. But I enjoy it. I enjoy the motions of the game. And if they win, that's okay. And I got to say, I prefer if the Yankees win the game that I'm watching. But I'm not left disappointed if they don't win the game. So again, there's a fine line where if I go out to dinner, it has to be the greatest dinner I've ever had. But I'll be honest, if it's not a real good dinner, I'm a little disappointed in the moment and I move on. I don't have to make a point of it or go on to whatever those social things and talk about it.
Yeah, report about it.
Yeah, it's really just a great and very subtle question. Thank you, Anthony.
So what I was hearing from what you were saying initially
answering Anthony's question is that there's this like continuum of craving and clinging. Maybe that's the 12 causative links, but there's a continuum of craving and clinging. Recognizing it wherever it is, is the beginning of the process of letting it go. Maybe you let it go at 5, just to use Anthony's example, 5 articles deep, 1 article deep. Maybe then you start recognizing it at seeing an image of an article, or seeing an article and thinking and recognizing the thoughts that come up. I really want to read that, then I can have this conversation with somebody else about the article that I read or whatever. And then you recognize it, I don't know, further back from that I've never experienced that further backness. But I've recognized it like along, so I'm hoping there's more, like in the negative direction, or maybe in the layers. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, no, that's right. For most of us, it's a gradual undoing of our clinging, and for most of us, it's just that way. It's 6 articles, 4 articles, 3 articles, 2 articles, and no articles. And not being obsessed with reading X number of articles doesn't mean you won't read any articles.
Right.
It simply means you won't be obsessed with it. The obsession won't drive you to continue to read X number of articles about anything. It could be fly fishing or Donald Trump or anything. And you motivation for doing anything will simply be what is most relevant in this moment, in reference to what's occurring in this moment. And what's occurring in this moment is in reference to a human being, no human being there. So you may find that you're meeting with the president tomorrow. And so you would like to get as much background, and in a realistic way, you might read 7 articles or, 7 dispensations about the subject at hand, but it won't be done out of an obsessive way, or just because it's practical. I may find that I'm going fly fishing next week, and I'd really like to tie my own fly. So it requires for me to read maybe a couple books on fly tying. I've never done that in my life, but it won't be. It'll be done out of a practical need rather than an obsession, a distraction. So I would bet many people, and notice I'm putting this in a general way, I would bet that many people that find them reading article after article after article about Donald Trump are doing it more out of an obsession rather than simply wanting to learn a subject. Now, again, that could be anything.
and the key to that is
intention. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
You're right.
But it's like Jen and I.
No, just to like let it go, not because it's my experience is always the judgment that comes after recognizing there's clinging and craving happening, and then immediate judgment.
Yes.
And then
and what is my intention here, and everything? And this relates right back to this particular sutta, the mindfulness. What is my intention? Why am I doing this? And everything. And if my intention is to continue clinging or increase clinging and increase craving, I mean, those things just seem to go, one feeds the other, then my intention is to continue clinging. And where is that coming from? It's rooted in ignorance. It's just that way. And again, it's such an important and fundamentally valid question. Well, what happens when I let go of all clinging? Can I enjoy a damn Met game once in a while? Well, yeah, you can. Enjoy what's occurring rather than clinging to the outcome. Probably clinging to a sports team, creating an identity through a sports team is one of the best examples of eye-making, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mets fan. I'm a Yankees fan.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody does it. If you're a sports fan in any way, you create an identity. It always seemed a little odd to me why people, even when I was younger, accept I couldn't get past the fact that I'm a Yankee fan because the proximity and my family was. You know, I mean, I used to question myself, how come I don't really like the Cardinals? I like their uniforms better than the Yankees. That's why I was questioning myself. But I couldn't be a Cardinals fan because I didn't have that identity. You know, and when I saw myself in the future as a grown man playing center field, it was always for the Yankees. Creative visualization doesn't work, folks. Becky, you had a question.
I have a question. So if I'm saying to myself, or if I'm recognizing that I'm obsessively reading articles about Donald Trump or the pony under the horse shit, that's clinging.
That's clinging.
Yes. But if I now understand that, I know that's clinging. I've backed away from that. But if it's not relevant to the moment, like if I'm not going to visit the president tomorrow, and I just want to read the news headline for today because I want to be aware of what's happening in the world, a form of clinging?
I would say
Or
no.
eye-making?
Well, I wouldn't say so. I don't know your underlying motivation, but I would say the way you're describing it.
Understand that, yes.
But that's where the Eightfold Path comes in. That's how we apply it. Is what I'm engaged in right now, this article that I'm reading, is it an aspect? Am I looking at it through right view? Is my intention pure? Is it framed by right speech, right action? An example would be, I'm going to read this because I want to read this because I'm going to find something out about the president that I can now talk about my friends or call CNN or whatever. That's the wrong intention, unless you're an investigative reporter. But to understand what's going on in the world is just part of being part in the world. I'll use myself again as an example. There was a time in my life where I had the news on constantly. And when I was home, the news channel was playing in the background unless there was a Yankee game on, and that was playing. Constant distraction. It took me a while, but eventually I realized that this is, and I was always just caught up in the terrible things in the world. It took a while, but eventually I said, I can't do this anymore. And I slowly cut back. I weaned myself off of constant TV to the point where I wasn't watching it at all. In fact, for years, I didn't watch. I mean, very rarely I watched even any news. And surprisingly, the world got along pretty fine without me watching what was going on. You know, I didn't have to monitor it.
And you can find out what the news is just through talking to other people and seeing it on the screens when you pass stores. And
right.
Yeah, but I also got a news. It was, you know, probably around the time when I first got my first iPad, I'd get this news aggregator, you know, once in a while. So I knew what was going on in the world, but I was no longer just using it as a distraction. Around the time of the probably the midsummer or maybe a little bit later, when all this new, I started watching the news again, became interested. But I was also very careful. I didn't watch it obsessively. In the beginning, I watched it about once a week. I gave myself an hour, and I wasn't rigid about it, but that was enough. I was able to catch up on what was going on, and it was incredibly interesting. I did not create a favorite. I didn't care whether Hillary won or Donald won, but it was, and maybe because of that, it was even more interesting watching how it all developed. And even right now, the chaos, and maybe that's not even a strong enough word, that's developed is interesting to me, to maintain a level of mindfulness about the whole process. So to answer your question, it's perfectly appropriate to be open to the world, but it's not appropriate to be joined with the world. And if you look at, this is just a good example, you look at the political climate, it seems like almost everybody is on one side or the other, rather than just understanding this is an ongoing process. It's been going on ever since I've been alive and long before that, and just as a political process in this country. There's always been And it seems, because of the rhetoric more than the reality, I think that things seem to be more dire from both sides.
Right.
Just the middle way points us into the middle. This is just part of the political process of a very can't think of the right word, a very fallible but best world has ever seen. What we have going here. So that's the answer to that. You're welcome. Did it answer your question?
It did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I was told, I think this was Thursday night, I might have been, or Tuesday, I think. The whole point of the Dhamma is not to be detached from the world in any way. It's to be completely engaged in a dispassionate way with this incredible thing, human life. It is remarkable what we have here. But to not lose sight of the most important part of being a human being is to gain full human maturity, to wake up. And we can't do that if we're clinging to things, objects, events, views, and ideas. But when we do wake up, we can be completely involved in life as life occurs. We can go to Mets games and enjoy them, sport, whether they win or lose. We can enjoy the interesting political process that's always going on. Good opera, and we can enjoy a lousy opera because we enjoy, and I mean this in a non-mocking way. We can enjoy it because of the effort that a person might be putting in who's not quite the greatest opera singer. Simply because of the art form that's there. Do you understand what I'm saying? But if I'm a critic, if I have an idea of how a perfect voice should always be and always perform, I can't enjoy someone who's just putting in a great effort, can I? I'm going too far with the metaphor, but I hope not. Life is here to be enjoyed. And we can enjoy it much more fully when we don't need it to be a certain way, when our team doesn't always have to win. Lorna, you've had your hand up for...
Yeah. Just getting back to Anthony's, when you're speaking about the Donald Trump article and, he needed to reach 6, now it's down to 4 or whatever. And he's saying that, isn't it nice to get involved with things, but, and then he says, I can't imagine life not being involved. But really, since we were children, we were doing this. And we had our obsessions when we were 5, not toys. We had our obsessions when we were 10, when we were 20, whatever. And it's just and it's seeing the continuous. We think it's important at the time. We think this is important right now. The silliness of it, the big picture is that it's all silly. It's all continuum I'm making, which makes you miss your life. And bringing the impermanence into this, that every bit of clinging that we do is impermanent. And we just move on from one to the other, to the other, to the, and we've been doing it all our lives. And it's seeing the big picture that I think helps us see the living moment. That's just what I want to say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It all does come back to that impermanence and the 3 marks of existence. Why would we hold on to anything? Kandana said that first teaching the Buddha ever gave, all conditioned things that arise are subject to cessation. The Buddha said, bingo. He didn't really say bingo, but I like to say, bingo, you got it. Why hold on to anything? And again, it doesn't, to me, that brings a more of a meaningful immediacy to what's occurring rather than diminishing it in any way, such as the Mets game that I don't mean to pick on you. I'm just it's a really good metaphor. The Mets game that I'm watching right now, what's a perfect example of impermanence? Because every moment of it, maybe that's why I enjoy it so much. Every moment is an example of impermanence. Because in a baseball game, it could be the most slow, boring thing that anybody's ever imagined. There's a 450-foot home run. That's exciting. Talking to me about golf. I used to play a lot of golf. I can't anymore, mostly because of my legs. But when I was younger, I was obsessed with getting better and getting better. You know, and I had the fantasy, kind of like the center field fantasy, playing on a PGA Tour one day. And when I had that way of looking at it, no matter how well I played, it wasn't good enough. And I was always a little bit, if I shot a 74 was the best round I ever had. If I shot, which is pretty good. If I shot a 74, it wasn't enough. I should have been a 72. But when I started developing my understanding, I let go of the need to be the greatest golfer in the world and just enjoy, of course, and hitting a golf ball and hitting a golf ball as good as I can. Shot, it was fine. It was just okay. And I get to hit it again. But I still remember, I don't know if you ever heard of Barry Sears, this guy that wrote a book years ago about the flow and being in the flow. I still remember this one perfect shot that I hit. It was many years ago. Perfect. It just was that way. It was a long drive. It turned nice, right down the middle of the fairway. It felt good. As soon as I hit the ball, I knew that it was perfect.
The inner game.
Pardon me?
The inner game.
The inner game. And I still, and it's not so much that John Haspel hit this perfect drive. It was how it felt to me.
Yeah.
The whole thing. I remember the golf course I was on, Quail Ridge. And I can still see the ball in the air. Clinging to it. It was completely in the moment, you know. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's playing golf, and he says, "Don't you miss it?" I says, "I really don't. I mean, I'd love to be able to go out and play golf today, but I don't miss it because I experienced it. How could I miss something? I had the opportunity to actually do it. And now I'm doing this." All conditioned things that arise are subject to cessation. Why hold on to anything? Why hold on to the ideal that, oh, if I just played more often and if I was just younger, those are all, isn't that ridiculous to even think that way? I can't be any younger than I am. I can't. How can I? But if I'm going to be who I am, I have to be who I was, don't I?
Yeah.
So why get upset over any of it? And when you take that into what's occurring in this present moment, the opportunity to awaken, and each and every one of us has that opportunity because we're who we are. So, go on to the next section. Let me see where we are. I'm going to finish this part and then we'll call it a day because I think we covered a lot. So, let me go back to that one paragraph. Remain mindful of the body form and the clinging that arises from the body form. Be mindful of the arising of clinging to the body form. Be mindful that when clinging to the body form is completely abandoned, clinging to the body form will not arise in the future. In this way, one remains mindful of the sixth sense base and the arising and passing away of the sixth sense base, independent of and not clinging to anything in the world. This is how one remains mindful of the sixth sense base in and of themselves. Again, taking us back to that theme, recognizing the arising and the passing away of all of it. And in this case, these eye consciousness, ear consciousness, etc., clinging to those. They're all impermanent. What's occurring is impermanent, no matter what it is. And the impressions I'm making of them are impermanent, meaning the discernment over I like this, I don't like that, because even that changes over time. The things that we like and dislike, don't they? They're all impermanent. Yet, we'll create identities over them. And it's in that creating the identity that we create the stress in our lives. Rather than just being fully engaged in life. we then are the reference point to what's occurring, rather than the director of what's occurring, or the attempted directing of that. It's such a good metaphor. You really got me thinking. Would it be enjoyable to you if the Mets won 162 games every year, year after year after year?
Probably not.
Yeah,
but that's like what it's like being a Yankees fan, because they always win.
they run often, but that's what a Mets fan will always say. The Yankees always win, but they don't always win.
Now you're labeling.
We wanted. I mean, we think that's the game. We should always get what we want and never get what we don't want. If we did, life would be awful. It'd be worse than it is right now, wouldn't it? We could. I would bet if we could do that for 24 hours, get only what we want, we couldn't wait for the next day, for just a little break. Yet we think that's what life is about.
Yeah.
Rather than awakening.
The sixth sense space. The sixth would be our mind, or?
Oh, I didn't finish it. Yes, the sixth sense space. Maybe I should finish and keep it in context. That last paragraph really closed it up, but the Buddha didn't address consciousness there. The sixth sense space is our ongoing consciousness. Remember, it's that consciousness that's rooted in ignorance. And to simply be mindful of it, that's what's occurring. If I'm creating a disturbance in my mind in any way, it's because my thinking is still rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Recognize it and develop the Eightfold Path to abandon it. And once this clinging is completely abandoned, this obsession is completely abandoned, it will not rise again. The Buddha is giving us an assurance that it's possible to do this, maintain that. And he's speaking to questions just like that. What happens when I awaken? How do I keep it? How do I know? Well, before we go around, any other specific questions on this, and then we'll just go around the room. Right. Anthony.
Hi, John.
Thank you.
Thanks. That was a great talk. And I thought Lorna's point was great, how you can look at impermanence to put perspective. The other thing I was thinking is also helpful is compassion.
Yeah.
Because if you can see the person you've identified as your enemy in an empathic way, you can sort of want better for them than ill will.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's another very helpful practice
Yeah.
that I really want to get more into. I meditate a lot, but I don't do enough metta and compassion.
It's such an important part of this. I got an interesting email from a student who said, comes here occasionally, what about this compassion, and how does I think the question was, I was told that the path is a path of wisdom and compassion, which really relates more to the Mahayana schools and the Bodhisattva. So where does compassion come in the Eightfold Path? Well, compassion comes from a natural expression of a fully mature human being. The most compassionate being is one who has developed the Eightfold Path, has developed that deep sense of selflessness, and can truly be present in the world. It's why I always say that the most loving thing I can do for myself and for everyone else is to develop the Dhamma and awaken. Be truly compassionate. And you think of the Buddha as an example of compassion. When we look at an example of compassion, we think of the Buddha. But he was not much engaged in the world until he awakened. And then he said the most compassionate thing, the thing that is imbued with the greatest generosity is teaching someone the Dhamma. And not all of us are going to be Dhamma teachers, but being an exemplar of that is the greatest compassion. We can't be truly compassionate if we're still concerned with this thing, this me. What am I getting out of it? And even that has clouded what has been called compassion, hasn't it? I mean, I'll use it just some examples is the Christian Crusades or the modern jihads. Those all arise out of a so-called, and I don't mean to mix the two up, but the people involved in the Christian Crusades believed that they were being truly compassionate, but it grew out of the sense of, I know what everybody else needs,
Right.
and I'm saving all these people, even though we got pretty brutal. So compassion without wisdom can often be hurtful. I'm like, this has nothing, not relating this at all to you, but it's important that if we really want to be compassionate, to develop wisdom first and marry it that way. You bring up another great point. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, we can have a whole talk on compassion.
Yeah, it is. It's if there's anything, I mean, what the world needs now is love, is compassionate people who have the wisdom to express it in a useful way. So maybe we're moving there. I hope so. Jen, good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you. Oh, I always feel better when I come here.
I do too.
Oh, I think you walked through something in the beginning that was helpful. I guess just I've just been distracted. My practice is going well in terms of the meditation and the discipline of meditating twice a day. Has always been there. It's just the actual meditations themselves really distracted. And then just the day-to-day, even like continually bringing the Eightfold Path into my mind, I still feel distracted and experiencing the hindrances. And I think your explanation in the beginning where I can't exactly now, it's already gone. I feel like I should listen to the talk again. Listening to you say recognize clinging in the body and let it go. Recognize, and it's just so much detail in there, repeated over and over again and explained from so many perspectives. And I see it making me feel better, and I see the conditioning kind of falling away. Okay. Because there's so much judgment, I think, when I recognize clinging. And that's where my ego, takes off, and I get distracted and can't just say, okay, you're clinging. That's all you have to do is recognize that you're in wrong mindfulness and enter in right mindfulness.
At that point of recognition,
right?
That's where you practice it. But there's such subtle conditioning, just as part of living in the world, that if there's something we recognize we have to change, it's because we're wrong or we're bad.
Yeah.
We can't leave that other part out. Rather than it would just be skillful to change this. And again, as we remain mindful of the Eightfold Path and look at it that way, that it is just towards awakening that I'm letting this go. Period. Not because anything. But it's so hard to do that. Well, really, I mean, that's more so in the Western world, that in order to change something, we first have to find out what's wrong, beat ourselves up for about a week and a half, and then we can change it. But even there's still some parts of like Southeast Asia that any thought of yourself as being bad or not up to snuff is a ridiculous thought. They don't even have that. And that's changed a lot over the years. But it used to be, if you went into Southeast Asia and you had any kind of hateful thought, you look at like you're crazy. How can you even think that way? Right. And it is crazy to think that way, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But it's not crazy to realize, well, I'm holding on to a wrong view, an unskillful view. I'm going to change it. And we have this great framework, how to do it. I'm in wrong view, enter, remain in right view. Remember how the Buddha even taught how to change our. If you find yourself in wrong view, enter, remain in right view. He didn't say, if you're in the wrong view, you dumb.
How many times have you heard
Kick yourself in the
Yeah.
Has all the reasons why you're in wrong view.
Yeah.
And analyze them.
And then blame your mother for that.
Yeah, that's right. And you go to your therapist. You got to find someone to blame. Where'd it come from? Rather than to recognize that all conditioned things that arise are subject to cessation. Even this absurd view, we were talking about that, I guess it was Tuesday night,
Yeah.
about the absurdity of it. Of seeing yourself and the world in this way is really absurd. It just is. So don't take none of it's personal unless we make it personal. So let it go. Thank you. Becky, good to see you this morning.
Good to be here. Well, I just feel really good now after being here. So, and I've been meditating more, at least once a day. I think I only missed one day this week.
Yeah. And
so that's really been helping. I'm a little different inside. That's the only way I can explain it. I don't know, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And it's just different.
Yeah.
And when it's bad, it's still, when I felt bad in a certain way. Things were like either in my chest or in my stomach. Now they're more diffuse, if this makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
And I was concerned about that. I didn't know if that was something that I should be concerned about. And I talked to Matt about it, and he said that maybe it's because things are loosening up or moving. And so after I talked to him, then I felt like I'll just go with this. I'll just recognize it, and that'll be that. So that's sort of where I'm at right now. And when I came here today, I was kind of like medium, and now I feel good. I feel like I learned a lot today about how can you be at peace with a less than peaceful mind state. You can't. It's not as much fun.
There's not as much you
It's
in
not
it.
as much fun, but it's more fun than just, saying, why do I feel like this? I must be depressed. I have to go here. I have to get this. I have to do that. It's just like, okay, you have a less than peaceful mind state. Just accept it and go on.
Okay.
And it you can do it.
Yeah, right.
And it will, then things will get better faster.
Yeah. And if they don't, it's okay too. It's just
That's right. That's right. No, and sometimes they don't. I mean, it could go for days.
Yeah.
For days. Get bogged down in it.
Yeah. Thank you. That diffuse state that you're talking about is just that. You're diminishing your attachment to things being different than they are. Of course, it can seem very disconcerting because it's like what Anthony was talking about. It feels like there's no you. You're losing control almost.
Yes.
And when you can be at peace with that type of mind state, you continue to move towards awakening. If you hold on at that point, which is okay too. Some people, when they start getting to those deeper levels of release, stop, because it becomes really scary and you're moving into unfamiliar territory. But when you remember, what you're letting go of is like, as the Buddha described it, it's like foam on the ocean. You're not letting go of anything. It's not like you're not letting go of anything that's not that valuable. You're not letting go of anything, period. Even though it seems so substantial. You take a breath and you move into the next moment. Mindfully. Thank you. Eva, good to see you. How are you?
Interestingly that Anthony should mention the mother situation, but I have a relationship with my mother, and it's always caused me difficulty. And I think that, curiously, what I ended up doing was being gentle.
I'll be out in a minute.
Yeah, I'm just going to get a cigarette.
Okay, yeah, but we'll be done in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry, Eva.
Being gentle with myself. I decided to face what was there that I was not dealing with in a correct way, and I can't really explain it because I did not analyze where it came from or any of that. What I did was I just let myself fully admit it to myself, because I was just pushing it away, and no, it can't be, and it's not true, and this, and I just said, just sit there and soak it up and, feel it, and it helped.
Yeah.
And then I was better able to be with my mother, because I kind of didn't have the weight of it, having to, it's like, okay, I look at my mother, but before I look at my mother, all this is there, and it was like, now it's not there. And I don't know, I don't know that tomorrow or the next day or 5 months from now it'll be back, but for right now, I just felt like by accepting the need to be gentle with myself, to just like, okay, it's, put it down, let it go, it's killing you. You're carrying it with you, and you're kind of almost enjoying it because it's part of who you are. It's your story, it's your history, it's your condition. And I can blame so much of my actions on it, it happened to me because of that. It's like, such a good thing. It feels so much lighter to be let go of it, and I just don't want it to be that. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that. That's such a personal situation. So when you can do it there, yourself as you are and your mom as she is really profound. You remind that occurred. My dad's 104 now. He's 99. My mom too, when she was still alive. And my dad is just the greatest guy in the world. He was my friend for most of my adult life. But he's got this nudgy way. It's just the way he knows how to give you the needle, and he loves doing it. And he would do it. I mean, he'd get under my skin every time I'd see him, and I'd leave there so frustrated, ready to strangle this poor old guy. And I remember clearly and at the same time I'm thinking, he's getting old. I might not ever see him again. I feel bad about how can I feel this way about him. I had this thought, because I was starting to develop a little bit of understanding, that he's never going to change. And I want to have a good relationship. I want him to continue to be my best friend. And I just said, I'm just not going to expect him to be any different. And it really changed. It took me a little while to work into that too. But he's 99 years old. He doesn't talk so well because of it. But he'll still give me the nudge, and he'll still give me that little look in his eye to see if he's getting to me. But it changed everything. And it was also the beginning of me starting to accept myself, because I didn't have to be any different for him either. He can be. That's fine. It's who he is. It's not going to be any different. At least I didn't think he would be.
There's a spiritual leader. I can't remember who it is, but he says, if you think you're truly an enlightened being, spend 2 weeks with your parents.
Yeah, that's right. You shouldn't have laughed at that.
We both laughed.
Or vice versa.
It's really true. Our closest relationships are usually the ones that are most difficult for us
I guess we'll find out in August, right?
I guess we
We're
will.
spending 2 weeks
We'll
together.
be spending 2 weeks
Wow. Nice. Good morning, Deb. Good to see you this morning.
Well, I related to a lot of things, but when Jen was saying that she's good at her practice or the routine, but it's harder with the distraction. I felt a lot like that. Like, I sit and I keep trying to tell myself what somebody in here said, this is my time for meditation, and remind myself that and try to be there. And it's just hard. There's a lot of distractions, so that's been a struggle for me. And then in terms of the discussion we've had this morning about attachments and form, and you said like with golf, you don't really miss it, and I think I miss things. You know, that's part of it's an attachment issue for me. You know, like being okay with separation. Especially in relationships, like especially my sister, who we all met a few weeks back, that we have a really, really close relationship. She lives in Portland, Oregon, and I miss the Northwest too, you know. But I'm, you know, my journey is accepting that I live here, and this is where I need to be right now. That's a constant clinging for me, like wanting to be back there, wanting to closer to my family back there. So, you know, that's you know, it's like, you know, sometimes you feel like you're doing okay with it, I'm focused at work, I'm doing what I'm supposed to, I'm living my life right now, you know, but other times I miss, you know, missing is something that comes up for me a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. So it describes dukkha, you know, not getting what you want. Regret is part of that, meaning you'd like a situation to be different than it is. That, and then say, you shouldn't feel that. He's teaching that to say that's a consequence of having a human life. It's entirely appropriate to feel that. What's not appropriate is to insist that it be different than it is. There's a significant difference there.
Yeah.
So you don't have to approve or disapprove that you're not living on the West Coast, but you accept it simply because acceptance doesn't mean that you have to be joyful over something either.
Right.
It's maybe another way of saying that it's part of a human experience. It doesn't have to be part of the human experience to regret something and need that regret to be different than it is. Yeah. It's the it's what I mean when I say to be at peace with less than peaceful mind states, because in this present moment, my mind state is regret or longing or wanting something, but it's also temporary. It's a temporary mind state. It's just where I'm at in this moment. Take a breath and take a meaningful, mindful movement into the next moment. Everything changes. It was the kind of underlying what Anthony began our class today with, and something that is often missed, that we become emotionless robots when we wake up, and it's just the opposite. We gain the ability to, and it relates to the Satipatthana Sutta, where the Buddha says we gain the ability to think what we want to think when we want to think it. We gain the ability to feel what we want to feel when we want to feel it. Or maybe a better way of saying that is we gain the ability to feel whatever is appropriate to feel without the need for it to be any different. So if it's appropriate to feel longing or something occurs and it's appropriate to feel great sadness. I heard about the thing, you know, the murders that happened in Doylestown. It was just awful. I mean, it left me just incredibly sad forever. You think about all the people involved and hurt by that. I didn't feel wonderful. I would be crazy to feel, even to feel neutral is not something that we're looking for. It would be inhuman to feel that way. It's deeply saddened to hear what human beings do to other human beings and the things we get entangled with. You know, and that's not that's it. It's not. It doesn't. It shouldn't be any different than it is. There is dukkha in the world, and again, underlying all of that is this incredible opportunity to awaken, despite the tragedies, despite all the other things going on in the world. As individuals, we each have the opportunity in this moment to awaken. We should take to it like our hair is on fire. Lorna, good to see you.
Good to be here. I don't really have anything very much to say. It's just that I found myself in the last couple of days getting entangled with a thought and a project I was working on, and I sort of worked out a better way of doing it. And I was getting high on life, like you do when you. Anyway, I didn't see at all what I was getting emotionally involved with until it sort of, as these things do, they're impermanent and they cycle out of your life. And then I looked back and looked, I really got emotionally involved with things, which is not what we should be doing. But I just didn't see it at the time. It's only in retrospect I look back and I've seen it. I look at my life and things that I'm involved with. You just mention that word, entanglement. Everybody has their entanglement, their specific things, and I have mine. And I consider myself most concentrated when I can feel the arising of, I guess, pleasure or excitement or whatever through my entanglements in life. Not concentrated. I feel the arising, but I don't notice the passing away. I just look for another arising, look for another arising, look for another arising, and just move on to the next thing. When I'm more concentrated, I can feel the arising and I can experience the passing away. Over the last few days, I got involved with this project, and there was no passing away in my life. I was just looking for the next rise, the next rise, the next rise. So I guess not so concentrated just for the last few days. But we've just talked it through. All of what you said today is very appropriate, and I'll take it home and try again.
That's all we can do. Yeah, that's all you can do. Interesting that distracted meditation and just the distracted days have been a little bit of an underlying theme here too, and that's impermanent too. It's just the nature of it. It doesn't mean that something's wrong. It's just in meditation when we find that it's just we keep coming back to our breath. That's an opportunity to deepen concentration, which is why we meditate. And as long as we continue, persistence is so important. Kshanti, patient forbearance. That's an important aspect of the Dhamma, to recognize that we're moving towards something. And even that moving towards is impermanent, it's fluid. It's always changing. So, thank you. Great class. We'll finish with Metta, but a quick reminder that today is our Sangha picnic at 1 o'clock, just over the bridge. So I hope you're all joining us. There's info on the website if you do need it. That begins at 1 o'clock. The new book, Becoming Buddha, is done. It's out there. It's waiting.
Wow.
Yeah.
For you.
The print version should be available on Amazon Monday, maybe Tuesday. The Kindle version is probably available today, although I did make one minor change. It's actually just a comma and a. So I'm putting a new file up today, but that should be ready Tuesday at the latest too. So, and those of you that were on retreat, I'll have copies for you at the end of next week, I think. So it's really,
And you're selling them here too. So.
Yeah, I'll have them here. It really is. I mean, it sounds.
Can you describe what the book is about?
It's the world's greatest book on Buddhism. And I'm not kidding. The name of the book is Becoming Buddha, and it describes why he taught it, how to develop it as he developed it, how to become Buddha, hence the title. And it also points out where the differences arise between what the Buddha taught and what is developed and how they arrived, which I think is important. So it really is a completely in context account of the Buddha's teachings, which I think, honestly, I've never come across a book like this that explains it.
So you talk about how the different versions of Buddhism have manifested and why.
Why and
That's
where they contradict what the Buddha actually taught, and because of the context.
Yeah, nothing really that I've ever seen has ever purported to do that.
No, it's more the other way. Let's try to present this in one unified. It's in that unified view that all the contradictions and confusions arise. And again, it's not right or wrong, but it's surprising that it's taken 2,600 years for one human being to write one. Why not just present what the Buddha taught and in the right context? You know, and that's not the question that I hope to answer with the book. I just think it was important. It's what I teach here. How I developed my practice that was meaningful, was in the proper context. And so it begins with just a brief introduction to the Buddha's life. It gets into what he awakened to. It gets into what dependent origination actually applies to. It explains exactly what becoming means, how becoming ignorant or becoming awakened, becoming Buddha. It gives a clear explanation of eye making in different ways, getting stuck in that feedback loop. It explains 5 clinging aggregates in a few different contexts.
Sounds like a great book.
I hope so. So yeah, it'll be out next week. So, great. Let's finish with metta, please. Find your relaxed meditative posture. And gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And take a moment to become aware of the sensation of breathing in your body. And just get a feel for what that's like, to be mindful of your breath in your body. And while remaining mindful of your breath in your body, notice that thoughts are flowing. These are the words of the Buddha from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, seated, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. For one of the class. Peace. Peace. Peace.
Peaches.
That's right. That's what I'm thinking about. Peaches are out. So we'll conclude our talks on the Satipatthana Sutta in about 2 weeks.